Jeff was born in East New Orleans in 2000. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Walnut Square with his younger brother Leo and his parents Matthew and Sheila. His parents despised where they lived, but both Jeff and Leo enjoyed it and got along with their peers, knowing nearly everyone in the neighborhood and growing up alongside them. Leo claims that one time they would sneak regularly on top of a large building at night and watch the city lights turn on. Jeff was closer to his brother than anyone else in his life, becoming more like friends than family. Jeff later interpreted that throughout his life, his parents neglected both him and his brother when it was just them together, as whenever somebody else were present. The two instead show a different personality and act more energetic around them than they would towards their own 2 sons. Jeff even notes that one time he witnessed his mother trying to watch a movie with other people, but would not do so with Leo when it was just the family alone. Jeff spent a year in boxing class after his father presumed him into joining because his boss's brother worked at the gym. Jeff later came to enjoy it and was planned to be signed up for another year. However, a week later when the boss's brother quit, Jeff's father ultimately changed his mind with the excuse that they could not afford further lessons, which Jeff knew was a lie. In 2015, a 15-year-old Jeff was informed that his father received a promotion and was planned to transfer to Mandeville, a town 25 miles away from New Orleans. Jeff was unhappy about the idea due to spending nearly his whole life in New Orleans, but ultimately decided to go along with it due to the change in attitude it could make with his family, especially for Leo. 6 weeks later, they moved to Fairmont Avenue, into a larger house where the family planned to start anew. A week after settling in, Jeff and Leo decided to take a bike ride into town to get familiar with it and remedy their homesickness. Upon stumbling into the village shopping center, Jeff and Leo took note of the video store, which reminded them of an aspect that they originally always go to when at New Orleans. While observing the inside, the brothers spotted a group of 3 kids riding around on their bikes that were left outside. Jeff and Leo confronted the boys and tried a civil approach to them. However, the kids, Randy, Troy, and Keith, were not in for making friends and started harassing them. Wanting to avoid a fight, Jeff tried to leave but was stopped by them. Leo insulted Randy after this, which led to Keith punching Leo in the face in response. Infuriated by this, Jeff attacked Keith and Troy, but before he could harm Randy, Leo stopped him after alerting him that the video store clerk witnessed the entire thing was on the phone, frantically speaking to someone, most likely the police. Jeff and Leo fled the scene and believed the matter was closed. After spending a few hours around town and even finding an abandoned hunting shack with running water in the forest, Jeff and Leo returned home to find 2 police cars parked outside of their house. Upon entering, Jeff and Leo are accused of assaulting Randy, Troy, and Keith over the asinine excuse of touching their bikes. Jeff tries to explain the issue to his parents, but they don't believe him. One of the officers, Williamson, explains that it was reported by several witnesses that Jeff started the confrontation between Randy and his friends. He also went on to explain that the witnesses claimed to have seen Jeff instigate the violence by punching Troy first. Jeff tries to explain the issue to the officer, but he disregards it and everything else he tells him. Williamson then goes on to explain that although the kids were seen riding Woods' brothers' bikes, their actions were justified due to Jeff and Leo's failure to chain them up. Jeff interprets that Williamson personally knows Randy, Troy, and Keith, and ultimately realizes that no matter what really happened, he will not listen to him. So he tries to turn to his parents' attention, believing that they would defend him and his brother. However, they also take the cop's side and believe that Jeff and Leo are starting fights simply due to their homesickness. Williamson then tells the brothers that they are on notice and are threatened with an arrest record if they do it again, and are also recommended to apologize to the 3 bullies. Jeff, unable to control his anger, insults and accuses Williamson of being close to Randy, which leads to him and his brother being sent to their rooms by Matt. Jeff and Leo converse that it is obvious that Randy is being protected by the police and must somehow have connections. They agree to steer clear from then on out. The next morning, Jeff and Lou are shunned by their parents for their actions the previous day. Matt reveals to Jeff that Randy's father, Maxwell Hayden, is a partner at his local firm that made ridiculous large amounts of money, and shames Jeff that his actions could have gotten him fired and the family would have been close to a dire situation. Jeff tries to appeal their side but what really happened, even presenting Lou's split lip as proof, but still believing Williamson's false information. They disregard what happened with the intentional stupidity, believing that the kids were simply playing rough with Lou and Jeff. Should not have fought them for that. Parents then tell Jeff and Lou that in order to avoid further problems, Lou is going to be taken to their Aunt Marcy's place in Louisiana for 2 weeks. Jeff interprets that because their parents know for a fact that the brothers do not enjoy staying at Marcy's house. They are in reality doing it to punish them both. Jeff and Lou try to change their mind, but the decision is made. Jeff offers to go as well, but the idea is rejected because Marcy believes that the two together are too rambunctious. Lou is then taken away and Jeff is left home without his only friend, which angers him and makes him feel extremely hurt. Days go by and tensions grow between Jeff and his parents. However, on an early Saturday morning, Sheila forces Jeff to visit Randy at his home and make friends with him. Jeff refuses to do so, interpreting that she only wants to do it so the family can come closer to Randy's parents and his father will have a better chance of getting promotion again. Sheila manipulates Jeff by using Lou as leverage, saying that if he makes it up with Randy, that Lou could return home early the day after. Jeff agrees, believing he has no other choice and wanting his brother home. Upon arrival to Randy's home, Randy's mother Bridget spends time with Sheila while Jeff goes to Randy's room and converses with him. Randy and Jeff bond for a bit and start to become friends, learning that their fathers both have similar traits and understanding that Randy hates the position that he's currently in. After a few hours, Sheila and Bridget leave the house to go somewhere, and Randy takes this opportunity to lead Jeff into his garage to show him something cool on the way there. Jeff starts to feel uneasy and believes that Randy is going to be up to no good, despite that they bonded moments before. Now the adults are out of the scene. In the garage, Randy shows Jeff his father's flare gun and loads it. Jeff realizes what is going to happen and tries to steer the conversation in a different direction. However, Troy and Keith arrive into the garage. Randy tells Jeff that Troy, Keith, and him are going to beat him up as revenge for what happened before, and he will not defend himself. Jeff tries to reason with Randy, but he does not take no for an answer, and aims the flare gun at Jeff, holding him at gunpoint. Having enough of this, Jeff's anger rises, and he decides that the only way to solve the situation is to fight back, disregarding that he was doing this to get his brother home, and that his father may get fired. Jeff breaks Randy's nose and knocks him to the ground, and then beats and incapacitates Troy and Keith. Having enough, Randy surrenders and accepts that they are even. Moments after, Bridget and Sheila arrive home and Randy panics that he'll be caught playing with the flare gun. Whilst desperately trying to unload the flare gun, it slips from his hand and discharges upon hitting the ground, which launches the flare right into Jeff's face and abruptly burns and disfigures the left side of his face. An ambulance arrives and Jeff is injected with morphine, which renders him asleep. Jeff then awakens in a hospital room with his face bandaged, unable to move due to the drugs. However, he overhears a conversation between his parents, Lou, and a doctor. Jeff overhears the doctor informing that Jeff's family, he will be fine and healthy and should recover in time. However, Sheila ignores these facts and instead asks more about Jeff's facial appearance due to the damage from the flare gun, displeasing Jeff. The doctor and Lou leave the room. Sheila and Matt continue to talk and Jeff overhears the entire conversation. Sheila discusses with Matt that they will not have to homeschool Jeff due to his appearance and no one will want to be his friend due to him being a pariah, and that it will be embarrassing for the parents. This angers Jeff due to the fact that the situation was technically her fault as she dragged him to Randy's house. Matt then mentions in disbelief that Jeff shot himself in the face with the flare gun. Sheila then goes on to explain in front of Jeff to Matt that Randy told the police and paramedics that Jeff found the flare gun and was carelessly showing off with it and discharged the flare into his face. This infuriates Jeff, that not only did Randy and his friends lie about his injury, but the fact that his parents went along and believed every word of it. Jeff then believes that Williamson was also a part of the incident. During his days in the hospital, Jeff began to fantasize about harming those who put him where he is now, losing his sanity due to the thirst of revenge. A few days later, Jeff is scheduled to go home. When the nurse arrives to change his bandages, he asks her for a mirror to see the aftermath of his injury. She hands him one, and for the first time, Jeff views his deformed face. The entire left side of his face was burned with some of his hair burned off as well. His left eye had been blinded. On the side of his mouth, a darker burn was shaped into a smile, which then continued up to his eye. On the return home, Sheila and Matt do not show any gratitude to Jeff being home. Liu, on the other hand, was pleased to see Jeff healthy and tried conversing with him, which Jeff gave little responses to. Liu even tried asking their parents about taking Jeff out to dinner to celebrate him coming home from the hospital, but instead Sheila just told them to go to sleep. During the evening before going to bed, Jeff stared at himself in the mirror and kept peeking under his bandages. Liu noticed this and tried to steer Jeff into a different direction by telling him that he's glad he's home and he's healthy. Jeff dismisses Liu's belief about him being okay and tells him that he's not okay. Liu did not understand what Jeff tried to tell him and took concern to this. Jeff did not respond to Liu anymore, which he left off to bed agitated. During the night, Jeff unbandaged his face and went into his parents' room with a knife. There, he murdered them out of hurt and revenge for them not listening to him and Liu, neglecting and not believing him or his brother in order to be normal before killing Sheila. Jeff reinterpreted everything that she did to him right in front of her. Sheila tried to manipulate Jeff into staring her, but instead Jeff told her to take her own advice from earlier by going to sleep. Jeff then proceeded to stab his mother countless times, later learned to be 76 in total. Jeff then went to Liu's bedroom and woke him up to say goodbye and that he loved him. Agitated from being awoken, Liu simply told Jeff that he loved him too and went back to sleep. Jeff then left the room and vanished. A week after Jeff murdered his parents, he then went on to track down Williamson and murdered him in his home for his corrupt actions in supporting Randy, and his assistance in covering up the flare gun incident. Williamson's son took a picture of Jeff as he was leaving the scene and published it to the media, labeling him as Jeff the Killer. A week after murdering Williamson, wanting to get the truth out, Jeff contacted the NOLA Watch, a small underfunded journalism company in New Orleans, asking for Benny Rosenberg, the editor-in-chief, to come and meet him at a fireworks tent for an interview on August 18th at night. Rosenberg arrived and conducted the interview. Jeff told him his story, recording it on a cassette tape that Rosenberg had brought along. After Jeff finished telling his story, he informs Rosenberg that he plans to get revenge on Randy, Troy, and Keith as well. Before leaving, Jeff kills Rosenberg out of bloodthirst and took the tape recorder with him. 2 weeks after the murder of Rosenberg, Jeff sent the cassette to Rosenberg's assistant at the NOLA Watch, Monica Davenport, where she published the recording to the public for all to see, making Rosenberg's death not in vain and successfully giving the NOLA Watch a higher reputation by getting Jeff's side of the story out. At the end of the tape, Jeff says the chilling last words that anyone would ever want to hear from him. In 2019, it's revealed in Liu's autobiography that after Jeff killed Rosenberg, he went on to murder Troy and Keith the night later in Keith's home. Before Jeff could kill Randy, however, his father realized the murders in an effort to protect his family. He had his family moved into a federal witness protection. After the killing of Troy and Keith, Jeff went missing and has never been seen again. It's even debatable whether Jeff is alive. It was also discovered that during the moving of Hayden's belongings, one of the movers discovered Maxwell's planner and unintentionally left it on their own possession during the moving, forgetting about it and only realizing they had it until after the moving was complete. returning it to Hayden's office building and leaving it at the receptionist desk in hopes that someone would transport it to them. An unknown chain of custody occurred, with the lead planner being examined by many government and law organizations, revealing that it contained details and logs about how Maxwell Hayden and Mandeville's corruption. When revealed to the public, it led to many Mandeville officials being fired. It was also revealed that before the tape containing the interview with Benny Rosenberg and Jeff Woods was delivered to the NOLA Watch and made public, the corrupt Mandeville police attempted to hide Rosenberg's death from the public, even after Monica Davenport called him and gave him his full name when she reported the interview to them. The theory arises that the police made Rosenberg's encounter with Jeff public. Troy and Keith's parents could have done something to prevent their deaths upon knowing that Jeff was still in the area. Jeff's killing sparked a reputation in Mandeville. The adults and authorities are trying to whitewash the incident, and teenagers created admiration for Jeff, making a group naming themselves Jeff's Killers by dressing up as Jeff and hanging out in an abandoned street called Shortcut Road. Randy Hayden came out of witness protection and presented his side of the story in an interview with Leslie Matthews, where he revealed more detail about the pressure his father laid on him and why his behavior was the way it was when he met Jeff. He also reveals that the reason he lied on the day of the flare gun injury was due to Williamson, who told Randy and his friends that they would suffer very severe consequences if the news got out. A mentally ill man named Brian Antoine dressed up as Jeff and attempts to attack Nancy Dermott and her son Lane at their home at night, likely due to her husband being a member of the Mandeville's corruption. Detective Dalton Bradshaw and Special State Investigator Simon Lyman investigate the attack and are followed by an individual in a Jimmy 4x4. When attempting to confront them, they drop a box containing an encrypted disc and photographs of Lou and Randy. At the bottom contained a message saying, 114 Shortcut Road, the dead prophet speaks, but when his source of power fades, his words of wisdom will forever be lost. Later on at 114 Shortcut Road, Trent Vickers, one of the many mentally ill kids who formed the Jeff's Killers Club, was found dead in the home, nailed to a wall with an MP3 player jammed in his mouth, playing a message on loop claiming that Jeff the Killer is a false god. After managing to get the disc found by Bradshaw and Lyman decrypted, it contains footage of Jeff before the flare gun injury and on the day of the incident, as well as shots of Randy Hayden and Lou Woods in the present day, indicating that all the events were set in motion. Shortly after the video ends, an officer watching the video shoots Lyman in the head before committing suicide. In 2016, Jane Arkansas and her father Drake moved into Mandeville and into the home that Jeff lived in. Drake planned to become a high authority in Mandeville and would try to rebuild the homes in Shortcut Road. However, his plan failed, and the followers of Jeff the Killer murdered him in his home. One of them, dressed as Jeff, tried to murder Jane, but she was saved by Drake's attorney, Russell Hardwick, and the house was burned down in confusion. In his dying breath, Drake told Jane to go to the bank and look for drawer 9. Before getting the disc they found decrypted, Bradshaw and Lyman attempted to find information on Dr. Joseph Sawyer, whom was the psychiatrist in charge of Brian Antoine before he left the ward he was assigned to when he was young. According to Penny Lux, a nurse working at the ward, she believed that the source of the Jeff the Killer fandom was created by Sawyer, as she was familiar with several children in the ward. But after they went under Sawyer's treatment, their interest changed into wanting to research more about Jeff the Killer. Several of those children were high-ranking self-proclaimed leaders of Jeff the Killers. Dalton Bradshaw and Simon Lyman find Nina Hopkins, a girl obsessed with Jeff the Killer, in the very hunting shack Lou and Jeff found on their day of the fight with Randy. She claims that Jeff had come back to the shack after murdering his parents, most likely to lay low. Nina also went on to confirm that Jeff's Killers was in fact created by Sawyer, as she overheard him giving Trent Vickers and Brian Antoine the idea. According to Nina Hopkins, Sawyer informed her that he knows the location of Jeff and that apparently he is still alive, and should Nina help him with his secrets, he would let her meet him. However, Nina later interpreted that Sawyer was lying. Whether he used this as a tactic to get her to do what he wants, or if it is in fact true, is unknown. In 2015, when Lee was being questioned by Detective Mitchell Hardy, he was asked if he had any idea where Jeff could have been hiding. Liu had an idea that Jeff may have been hiding in the shack he and his brother found on the day of the attack, but he does not give the information away to Hardy after becoming suspicious of the town's corruption. Liu was moved to an extended family in Texas and was recognized in school by many peers whom harassed him and bullied him for being the brother of Jeff. Liu eventually met a girl named Viviana Alexander who gave him the idea of spreading the word of his experiences with Jeff, which led to him becoming popular around his school. And eventually, he started using the story as a way of gaining fame and became less and less guilty. In 2016, Viviana later concurred the idea of getting Liu to write a book of his experiences with Jeff and to expand on it, which Liu decides he would do later. He and Viviana develop a romance. Viviana soon moves out of Texas into New Orleans. Her parents offer to take Liu with them, however he makes a decision late and attempts to catch up with them, but he's kidnapped by Reverend Buddy Carter, the leader of a group that had been harassing Viviana's family and her father's artwork. Carter makes a deal with Liu and offers to make him a wealthy man on the condition that he does not turn him over to the police, which Liu obliges after the annoyance of being the victim all the time, which led to Viviana losing all respect for him. Because of his wealth, Liu becomes a court-ordered adult and moves to New York, where he creates his book and publishes it in 2019, writing not only about his life with Jeff, but about the corruption of Mandeville. He did not credit Viviana in it after receiving a hateful email by her, resenting him. Liu was supposed to appear in an interview with Randy Hayden and Jack Elder to forgive him on the media. However, Randy went missing some time before the interview could even be conducted. Hearing of Jane Arkansas's activity in Mandeville, Liu and his girlfriend Jessica Lum traveled to Mandeville to meet her. After Randy Hayden was moved out of Mandeville along with his parents into Utah under their new identities, he and his father eventually had a violent argument, presumably before the events that transpired in Jane's story in 2016, blaming one another for the events that transpired and having a pride war, which then led to Maxwell insulting Randy for his apparent homosexuality, which in retaliation, Randy assaulted his father. After this, Maxwell was kicked out of the house by Bridget, agreeing with Randy. After moving out into his own life, Randy was harassed at home by Jeff's killers, who even walked into his house at times. Randy grew used to. Eventually, one of them drugged him and sent him into a nightmare that was controlled by them. In his nightmare, Randy made out that at least two of his captors were named Clarissa and Noah. He was saved by Dalton and Derek as per the events. When brought to the hospital, Randy was given an interview sometime later with Jack Elder via video chat. However, during the interview, the feed was hacked by an unknown party whom took control of the broadcast and revealed Joseph Sawyer bound to a chair, who two unknown figures proceeded to stab to death. Shortly after this, a red screen appears with the word "Kill Someone" flashing. Similar to what transpired with Dalton and Simon, the story ends with numerous 911 calls centers being requested across America. Randy, Dalton, Derek, and Nina's fates are left unknown.